There's no way around it. FPV can be expensive. However, there's a few ways to get free gear. One way is to become sponsored. Another way, the way that Jon Esca has found, is to review gear. Jon Esca is an FPV YouTuber that reviews gears online. And as a result, he gets free gear, which is awesome, but it kind of comes with a catch. So watch on to find out more. Before we watch, I'd like to take a moment to thank my patrons. My patrons are a great support to me. I really enjoy them. And if you've ever wanted a podcast version of these interviews, you can join my Patreon and you can get that. The link is in the description below, along with links to Jon's site. And I hope that you guys enjoy it. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring to you tonight Jon Esca, aka Jon E5. He is both a YouTuber and an FPV racer. How you doing, Jon?
Hey, how's it going this evening?
Good to see you, man. It's we've been just so the folks at home know, Jon and I have actually been chatting for a long time. Like, we've had a few like face-to-face calls like this, but we're both part of the No Small Creator group, and Jon actually keeps it very lively in that group. It's very, very entertaining to listen or to read his comments, and there have been times I just go check that group just because it says Jon Esca replied to a comment in No Small Creator, and I'll go in and I'll just be like, damn. It's so good. Somebody introduced themselves tonight, and I think your own. They're like, I'm so and so, and I do this and I do that, and I'm really looking forward to getting into this and getting into that. And you were like, show some content.
Yeah, I tend to do that.
Well, and I mean, you know, so let's go ahead and jump right into the first topic, which is that you do YouTube reviews, or you're a YouTuber. But you do FPV reviews.
Right.
And one of the things that I at one point I was like, you know what, I'll be an FPV reviewer, right? And I realized that I did not have I don't know is criticality a word?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't have like, I just wanted to be, I didn't want to be critical of anything. I'd be like, oh, well, this prop is good, but this prop is good too. Right? And it's like, but you know, neither is better than the other.
Right,
right. So I realized very quickly that like I was not going to be a good reviewer. So tell me about your channel, tell me what you do. And
Yep. So I've going on almost 2 years of just making reviews of a lot of the stuff that I use. And in the past year, it's expanded a little bit to where folks have asked me to do reviews on different products. So then that's gotten me to be able to get my hands on things that I wouldn't have normally bought for myself. And then sometimes they become things that I love, that I use all the time, or that I can recommend to other people. And what started it all is like I didn't really just want to be on YouTube at all, really. And I didn't essentially want to do FPV reviews at all either, but I found myself watching a lot of the FPV reviewers all the time. And, you know, a lot of us in FPV come from like an IT background. So I found myself trying out like almost every new thing that came out. And after about over a year went by, and I was like, I've had almost everything in my hands that a lot of these YouTubers have had. And if I would have just spent 10 minutes to make a video, and I do have, 10 years ago or so, I was kind of into the local indie film scene. So I know how to record video and edit. You wouldn't know it from my channel because I don't try to combine those two things too much, because then you'll be a perfectionist and never get anything out. But for just simple videos, I was like, why have I not done this? And for myself personally, what I would end up doing is I tend to collect hobbies, and when I get into one, like I really jump in hard. And so just to kind of put a self-imposed limit on myself, I was like, I don't need to have more than like 3 5-inch quads and like maybe 3 micros. Or I had said that specifically at one point. Mm-hmm. So when I started the videos, I was like, okay, I'm going to try to keep that limit. So if I want to get something, I need to get rid of the last thing. And so when I started to think maybe I should start making videos, I spent a whole year thinking about doing it, doing what I would say in my mind, but never actually doing anything. Because I kept coming from that indie film background. I was like, oh, I can get my cameras, get the lights, I'll have some cool effects, and I'll do some editing. And it led down a path of doing like zero. It was just thinking about it. And so I was like, all right, I need to strip all that out and just use my cell phone and just hit record and talk and see if it's any good. And it really wasn't that good. But a lot of the FPV reviewers are not that good. I mean, a lot of, even some of the semi-popular ones, I feel like they just kind of borrowed their wife's blue craft mat, pointed a cell phone at it, read off some measurements, and are like, here, click my links below.
Right.
And I was like, okay, I think I can do better than that. So not good by YouTube standards, but maybe slightly better than the average FPV review. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if I just talk about the things that I'm actually touching and compare the notes, and because especially for things like micros, both micros and 5-inch, because I was for a long time just trying to find the perfect thing I could fly from my driveway. Mm-hmm. And it was like, I've had 6 or 7 or 10 of these, so I can compare the differences to all of them. And then my professional background is a lot of making technical purchase recommendations to people. So I'm kind of in the habit of being able to explain to somebody that may not be an expert what things you're going to notice when you actually use it is different from this and that, and try to go about it that way. So that was kind of the initial goal. And I've been all around how to structure the videos. The first few, I would just sit there and talk forever. And then it was like, okay, nobody needs to watch like a 30-minute frame review. That's just like crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And, and then for a long time, I was a little bit self-conscious on, I wouldn't take the time to write them ahead of time, even though I have a lot of background in like creative writing as a hobby. It just, as a reviewer, I just didn't want to spend the time to do that. I wanted to try to, not keep myself from flying too much, which was my main hobby. So a lot of times what I would end up doing is just try to make things just short enough. So I would end up talking very slow. And so for my first 50 videos, I started speeding it up like 10 or 20%, and then that would make the sound like terrible. So like my first 100 videos, like everyone's complaining about the sound like constantly.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, at some point I either need to start writing these out or just learn how to talk faster. And so I stopped doing it a little bit a while ago. But eventually, different companies started liking some of the stuff I was doing, asking me if I wanted to review some of their stuff. And so I worked with a lot of the different companies out there. But really, it's just what I like to do. So I'm out there flying this stuff anyway. So if I can take 10 or 15 minutes, make a quick video, and that's kind of my, if you will, competitive advantage as far as like the reviewers go, is I feel like, one, I'm kind of used to presenting different technical stuff like in front of people. There was a time in my career where I was doing it fairly regularly, like 5 or 6 times a month in front of 30 people or 300 people or 500 people. And I actually like the bigger crowds more because you couldn't really sense them. So it's just like talking to a camera.
Yeah.
And so once I got into doing it, I was like, oh, this isn't that bad. So I could do it fairly quickly. And I am a little bit critical of some of the products. But I think that the reason I do that is that I always put the viewer or the consumer into like what I would consider my customer, as far as like from a business side when I was doing that kind of thing.
Sure.
And it's like, it doesn't matter if I'm, explaining a technology solution to you that's going to cost, $100 million or is going to cost you $100 for this bind and fly. Mm-hmm. You need to know the things that are going to go into your buying decision, and if I can help you make that decision. And then the other thing that I learned to do, which I kind of fell into, was try to qualify the statements with what type of a pilot I am, what type of skill level I am, stuff like that. A lot of the early days, the majority of FPV YouTubers are freestylers. Yeah. And so when I started trying to get tips on how to race, because my interest was a little bit more on the racing side, I don't want to pick on Kebab, but I would watch a lot of Kebab videos. And so they put tunes, or really any of the FPV tools. They put tunes, you could try them out, and it was like super high rates.
Right.
And then when I finally got, person to person with one of the more senior guys in my community, and he was like, all right, let me help you tune. And it was like, he was like, your rates are just out of control. Like, what is this? Yeah. And I was like, okay. It wasn't that he was telling me bad advice. It's just that I didn't get the difference, and I didn't have the knowledge base at that point to understand, like, oh, he's a different type of pilot than me. So whenever I try to give those advice, or anything like that, I always try to qualify with, this is where I'm coming from, this is my skill level. Anybody that's a racer that participates in the multi-GP qualifier, you get a ranking. So I can always say, like, for last year's multi-GP rankings, I was number 255. So that puts me like roughly in 25 or 25th percentile. So towards the top, but definitely not in the top 100. That put me in like the sportsman class, so not the pro class. Yeah. And I try to mention that in some of the reviews just to let people know, like,
this is your frame of reference.
Right. That's the frame of reference. Yeah. Exactly.
So you have this like extracurricular hobby that everybody in the FPV scene probably thinks is a dream, because people send you stuff to put on quads and fly around, right? I mean, it's like at some point, there's always the dream of being sponsored or doing this or doing that, and at the heart of it is a lot of times like, man, this stuff is kind of expensive, or it gets expensive when you break things over and over again. So it's nice that you get free stuff. But is there a downside to being a reviewer and getting free stuff all the time?
I think there is, and I'll kind of first start off by talking about like one of the first guys I knew in my community who was sponsored. And probably 3 or 4 years ago, this guy Ivan moved to Houston, where we're at, and all of like immediately, he's from Russia. He just started beating everyone, like just dominating our whole entire scene. And it was really cool whenever he got to compete on the national stage, just to find out, like, okay, how do we compare? Is he really that fast? And I think this year he was in the top 12 or top 15, so he's pretty fast. And he got a few sponsorships probably in 2017 or so. And I noticed, like, after 3 or 4 months, like this was before I started my channel, he kind of threw 2 or 3 of them to the side and was like, And I was like, why are you doing that? It's like, well, if I'm sponsored by, company A, then I got to use their cameras, I got to use their props, and he's like, I just want to win, and I don't want to be restricted to whatever kind of thing. So immediately I was like, okay, I get that. And I saw that as a limitation with sponsorship right away. And now I'm probably never going to be on that competitive level. And I, like you said, was like, hey, well, I'll definitely talk about something and it'll be awesome. One of the downsides, though, is I learned kind of early on, like, one of the people that sends me a lot of products is Banggood. Now, I've also worked with most of the other large companies in FPV, either writing articles or reviewing products, but they probably send me 65% of the stuff that I review that I haven't bought myself. So it's more than half. And when I first started working with them, they were like, hey, here's 15 things. Do any of these things look cool to you? And I was like, hey, these 3 do. Yeah. And they're like, okay, we'll send you all 3. And I was like, oh man, I should have said all of them.
All 15.
So then I was like, okay, well, what about these other 4 things? And they were like, okay, we'll send you those 2. And I learned really quickly, though, that if it wasn't something I was actually interested in flying myself, it became a chore. Whether it was a camera or motors or whatever, it was just like, I only have a certain amount of time to fly per month. Usually I try to get out there 4 to 6 times a month to fly 5-inch, and then I can, always fly from my driveway or whatever, probably another 4 or 5 times a month. Mm-hmm. So not a ton, but it's more than probably some people. But if I got to give up a full day or 2 out of that just to review something, it wasn't worth it to me at all. And so it was like, okay, I learned what to say yes to, what to say no to, and I started saying no to like a lot of stuff. And then the other downside is, I've probably been flying for almost 4 years, and probably the last 2 years have been with the channel. And really like the last 18 months have been people actually sending me stuff, or 12 months. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in the first 2 years, when something new came out, I remember two examples particularly. The time that the Armatan Chameleon came out, and the time that the Floss 2 came out. Mm-hmm. I was like so excited I was like clicking refresh to be able to get my order in first, so I get the first hands on it. Not because I wanted to review it, because I wanted to just build up and fly it. Right. And once packages start arriving like 3, 4, 5 times a week now, it's almost like that excitement is a lot of times taken away. Like I'm not really as excited for any one component anymore, just because
there's actually a term for that. It's called hedonistic. God, the example is the hedonistic treadmill, where you have, and for what it's worth, I've experienced this on my channel, not with stuff that I review, but it's like, the first time you hit 1,000 views on a video, it's like, oh my God, that's freaking amazing, right? And now I look at a video, and if a video hits under 1,000, I'm like, oh man, what a failure. And it's like, and I've had a couple of videos go pretty big, and that ends up warping your sense of what is normal. And so I can see how, like, if you have this stuff just showing up at your door all the time, like it's not exciting anymore.
Right. And it's not like it's bad, and like now I generally know what to say yes and no to, so it's never a chore, it's always fun. But it's like, I remember that feeling of, and the other thing that I almost feel like is it's ruined almost anything that I buy, even if it's not FPV related. Like I got a new camera the other day, and like I will probably use that camera mostly for this channel, but it's like, I've been into cameras for 20 years. Right. So, getting a new camera body is always exciting. And I was just like, I don't know if I even opened it the first day, which would never have happened like prior to this. So I'm like, oh no, did I kill my taste for like, or my ability to appreciate?
Where's my gadget lust?
Yes. Yeah. And I still want it, but it's like when I get it, it's like, you don't get that rush anymore. Right. So that's, maybe that's the downside.
Yeah, that's one of the things that happened to me. So I was an iOS engineer for quite a while. And, the new iPhone, when the first iPhone started coming out, it was like, oh my God, I've got to get these. Right. And then I dabbled in Android, did some Android programming for a while. And then, I don't know, about 5-6 years ago, like about the time the iPhone 6 came out, I was like, the 6 I was excited about. Then the 6S came out, and I was like, And then the 7 came out, and I was like, okay, whatever. And then the 10 came out, and I was like, I guess I'll try it.
Exactly.
It's like, and I was getting them for free because they were test devices.
Oh man, that is cool.
but then
it ruins it for you.
But like all this, so like at this point now, so I don't have that job anymore. Now I'm just down to an iPhone 7 Plus, and I'm like, I kind of want to go get one of the new iPhones, but I don't want to. Like, it's just it's this really bizarre, strange thing that happens to you. So, being a reviewer, interestingly, comes with a lot of extra baggage attached to it, right? Yeah, you get free gear, but on the other hand, there's an expectation that you're going to do something with that free gear. And I've heard this from a lot of the FPV reviewers. Not only that, but there's, to a degree, like a sense of excitement and pleasure that gets taken out of just getting gear. I know for me, when the FPV Fairy shows up and the mail is delivered and there's something new, I get super excited. For Jon, that's not so much the case. I experienced some of that on my own with things like iPhones. So there's a price to be paid. In our next episode, we talk about how Jon actually takes a unique approach to reviewing FPV gear. I hope that you'll enjoy it, tag along, and I'll see you soon. Bye.